Welcome to Life Happens, where Texans come to protect their legacy and prepare for the second half of life. Join your host, attorney Kim Hegwood of Your Legacy Legal Care, and our weekly guest as we navigate the challenges that emerge as life happens. Now here's your host, Kim Hegwood.
So today we're going to talk about, because I'm assuming that's how your the name of the company is basically what you're doing, and we're going to talk about the role of coaching and caregiving. And so, because I think that you probably find that a lot of people really don't know what to do all the time, and so
that's right. So Lizzy Care was really developed and formed as a response to a number of us who have gone through this journey ourselves. When a family member is diagnosed with memory loss, which often leads to a diagnosis of some kind of dementia, you really don't know where to start. You know what the end game is going to be, but you don't really know about that continuum of care between diagnosis and end of life. So
why is it important for caregivers to seek help early? Once they start realizing that their loved one has some type of memory loss.
Well, what has become apparent is often a family member, as they age, there is definitely some normal memory loss that happens, to be expected. It's like any organ in the family, any organ in the body, it begins to wear out a little bit. But there are some concerns when that memory loss is maybe a little bit more than forgetting where you've put the car keys. One of the classic differentiators is if you've forgotten where your car keys are, that's normal. If you've forgotten what the keys are for, that's maybe a sign of something a little bit more serious. So it's very useful to get a diagnosis early or understand what you're going to be dealing with early so that you can start planning and thinking about how you need to what things you need to have in place to make sure that your loved one is being cared for in the best possible way, and with an eye to what resources you have, how that's going to work. So it's like anything really, the more prepared you are, the easier it should be.
Yeah, I got a little bit ahead of the game in one aspect of it. Somebody had given me the little tile, and so which was great because I put it on my keys because I lose my phone a lot because I leave it. I set it down when I'm doing stuff, and I'm forever leaving it all over the house. So now my keys can find my phone, and my phone can find my keys.
And we take that a little bit further with people who have memory loss. So we suggest that's something we suggest, the Apple Tag or the tile, put it on their keys. So if you're concerned about your parent or your spouse, and they're not displaying full-blown typical dementia where they've forgotten your name, but they're getting a little bit forgetful and they may wander off somewhere, put a tag on their keys, and then you can track them without them really knowing. So I'm glad you brought that up. That's one of those little technology tricks that we pass on.
And so, but how can having a coach help family caregivers? So talk to us about that.
So within every family, there are dynamics and there are relationships, and it's very effective for a third party to come in and be able to give some advice that maybe a parent couldn't hear from a child. We all know what that kind of typical relationship is, and unfortunately with dementia, those roles are often reversed, and it becomes very difficult within a family for a parent to start taking advice from a child when it's traditionally been the other way around. So having a third party involved means that we can deliver tips, tricks, have conversations that are very less emotionally charged. And also we can bring all the people together. So if there are a number of what we call stakeholders, so that could be siblings, it could be family members, it could be friends, everybody can get together in what we call a safe space and talk about the issues at hand and talk about what's the best plan. And having a coach who can keep everybody accountable for their part of that is really helpful. Can prevent a lot of family tension.
So for caregivers that are, that are taking care of someone with dementia, what kind of things can they do to make life easier? Because
Well, what I like to say is think about the phrase I use is set it and forget it. But I say that in a British accent, set it and forget it. In American, that's set it and forget it. So set it and forget it means anything that you can automate that helps your life run smoothly, do it. So I'm talking about electricity bills, recurring phone bills, anything that you can get on an automatic schedule, do it. And think about taking that a little step further as well. Your grocery shopping. Put that on an automatic delivery. Anything that you can automate, anything that you can relieve some anxiety. It's a lot of it is about relieving anxiety, honestly, with dementia, because especially in the early stages when people may know that there's something going on, they don't really want to admit it. Often the spouses, the family members, the children don't want to admit it. It can help facilitate that space between forgetting and really not being able to do those things. So set it and forget it is the first thing I would say. And the other thing I would suggest is also having little whiteboard in the room. So what happens quite often that makes life really difficult for caregivers is they understand that something is going on with the person living with dementia. The person living with dementia is still in a state of denial. And what you want to try and do is create as much agency for the person living with dementia to make them feel as independent and as in control of their lives as they can be, because they are losing control. And that's what causes a lot of the upset and the anxiety and the tension between them and their caregivers. When the caregiver is always telling them the same thing, the caregiver gets annoyed. The person living with dementia doesn't understand why they're getting annoyed because they don't necessarily remember what's been said. So something like a whiteboard, you can actually buy sticky whiteboards that you can put up around the house. You can use wipeable pens, and you can just write the day of the week, the date, what's happening that day, so that they can, while they're still able to read, they can go and see, oh, the doctor's coming today. Oh, we've got a dentist appointment. And they don't have to keep asking the caregiver and creating that kind of feedback loop of tension and annoyance. So it's really about reducing anxiety for the person living with dementia and for their caregiver.
Well, definitely it can be very overwhelming and very frustrating for caregivers, especially
Absolutely.
when you've got someone that's very repetitive. And so what kind of technologies do y'all recommend that, help people support someone that has dementia?
Well, one of the most useful pieces of technology, which a lot of homes have these days and is very reasonably priced, is the Alexa, the Echo. So the Echo Alexa, you can program that to do anything. You can I have it set for my alarm in the morning. You can have that set for medication reminders. You can also, what's lovely about the Echo as well is you can also set it with a particular song that comes on. So it may be you have a wake up song in the morning to get you out of bed, and then you have a different song that means something to you to remind you to take medications. So that's particularly useful if somebody with dementia is living a lot by themselves and doesn't have somebody with them the whole time. So I would say that would be number one, is using the Alexa. In the same sort of like family of products, there are also cameras. And they can also be very, very useful internal cameras if somebody is living alone. And there's motion detectors. There's a whole host of very simple technologies which can be useful for both the person living with dementia and for their loved ones who are wanting to make sure that they are as safe as they possibly can be.
It surprised me that the technology of some of the things they can do, to know whether or not your loved one is not standing anymore. They're now, because they've fallen, and you can tell because of where the heat is on the floor versus up higher. I mean, it's amazing the type of technology that's out there now that, is just, I think 20 years ago when I was doing caregiving, you didn't have any of that stuff.
That's right.
So, and I think barely iPhones were, maybe just barely coming out then. So it was a whole lot of different things. And, so in that aspect of it, and we still talked on the phones on the wall, so
That's
a
right.
lot
That's
of
right.
things have changed.
And I think you're right. I think, we have evolved, we have grown so much in terms of technology in our everyday use and our everyday lives. And I think it's very useful to think about what we have already, rather than going out and buying something new that is specific to Alzheimer's or dementia. Actually thinking about what have we got in the home at the moment. And as I say, a lot of people use the Alexa. The Alexa is also really, really good for music. As I mentioned, you can have the medications the medication reminder set with a song. But what you can also do is, music is extremely therapeutic for people living with Alzheimer's and dementia. And I have like subscriptions attached to my Alexa, but I'm pretty sure through Amazon Music they've got a pretty big free catalog, so you can find music that can often, when you are in those tense situations with your loved one who's having a meltdown, or what you would term a meltdown, if you put some music on in the background, try it out, because there's been an awful lot of scientific studies into the benefits of particular music and how that resonates with somebody who is losing their memory. The audio piece and the feeling piece of the brain is actually the last thing to go with somebody with dementia. In fact, when they pass, I think there's been studies that show they have about 40% of those senses still intact. So that remains with them. Their memory may go, but the audio memory does not go. So really, really valuable tip there.
So since we're talking about tips, what kind of tips do you have for caregivers on helping them build a support team? Because we find that a lot of caregivers are real reluctant to do that. And so,
well, funnily enough, I was just speaking with a client earlier today. My attitude, and it has served me really well through my whole life, is people want to help. Mm-hmm. People really want to help. Most people they just don't know how to help. So you have to be really specific, and you have to not be afraid to ask. So you may have a number of friends. I would say think about your family first, right? The immediate support system. But also think about that's one step beyond. And then even one step beyond there. I was speaking with a lady earlier who lives in a small town, and she had been out for a walk with her husband, and he wandered off. And the shopkeeper said to her, "I know what your husband looks like. I'm going to come and help you." And it was a lifeline for her in that moment, because she was panicking and didn't really know what to do. This hadn't happened before. This was the first time, and she didn't really have any of the precautions in place. She didn't have the AirTag, and he had just wandered off quite blithely, and she really didn't know what to do. So people are really people understand, there's a lot of what we're living in a world where people understand dementia in a much better way. The stigma around all sorts of mental health and brain conditions has really changed in the last 20 to 30 years. People want to help. They understand that it's not something anybody can help or has done or has caused, and anything they can do, they will do. So the other piece is, it's often, I think you've probably heard this with people who have had surgery or people who are dying. What can I do? How can I help? be specific. Say, I know that you are really good at cooking, and it would be really helpful if I knew that a meal was being provided for them once or twice a week, or for me, because I'm just burnt out. I'm spending so much time worrying about my loved one. I just haven't got the time to eat. Or I haven't got the time to cook. So your meatballs are amazing. If you could bring me around a pan of meatballs, that would be fantastic. And people really want to do that kind of thing. So I would say that would be the first thing. And my other thing is tell people what's going on, because if you're pretending that everything is okay, people aren't aware that you need the help. Or they may be embarrassed to mention it to you because you haven't been forthcoming about it. And maybe you haven't noticed, maybe you're trying to cope. So be very open about it. There are cards that the Alzheimer's Association hands out that say that you can give to your loved one who is living with dementia, that say, I have dementia, please make allowances for my behavior. And just setting that scene is just really valuable. And doctors, lawyers, financial planners, the sooner that you can start building out your team as you go through the journey, the better it is for you, and the better it is for your loved one. While your loved one, or if it's you that's actually managing, who's realizing that you have some kind of memory loss, if you're still able to make those choices, make your choices be known, and then it just allows your team and everybody to honor those wishes for you as you go through the journey.
So how can you convince a caregiver or convince the loved ones, so caregivers, so you're like, mom, dad, you need some extra help? How do you get them to get there? Because we find that that's a pretty hard thing to get someone, that's especially when they've been recently diagnosed, and and they're a little bit further along, and they're like, I don't need anybody in the house, I don't need anybody watching me, I can take care of myself.
Right.
So how do you get the person that needs the help? How do you talk to them?
Well, again, that's where the coaching piece comes in. We work with a number of coaches who, depending on, everybody's situation is very different, which is why we have different coaches to help different people with different parts of their journey. We're very careful about who we match people with. We have a coach at the moment. And he is amazing at conflict resolution. And he denial is huge. Denial always comes up in everybody's journey. There's nothing wrong with me. Everything is fine. What we have also found really, really helpful is introducing companion care. So companion care is a type of care where you're not doing what one would typically think of as home health activities, like personal grooming and that sort of thing. A companion is someone there who, if you have been an attorney up until fairly recently, and you're used to running your business, chances are you still want to be able to check your emails. So we will bring people in who are specifically able to relate to somebody's interests, and that could be checking emails. That then allows their loved ones to maybe go out for a couple of hours and have a bit of what we call respite from doing the primary caregiving. And it also allows the person living with dementia to have a little bit of dignity and to retain a little bit of who they were before. And it's also a really easy way to start bringing in care, because it's all about feeling comfortable, right? And a person living with dementia needs to feel safe, because so many things are happening around them that they understand that they're beginning to lose their understanding and lose control. So if there's something that they're passionate about, we work with a gentleman at the moment who loves to do Photoshop. So we have a companion who goes in and helps him with Photoshop, and the companion doesn't care if he asks him the same question 16 times, because he's being paid to answer those questions. If it's a spouse or a loved one, it can get a little frustrating. So we have some kind of proven techniques and strategies to introduce that care piece and make sure that everybody is comfortable with the situation.
Perfect. So Sarah, if somebody wants to find you so they can get some coaching or get that person to help with Photoshop or whatever it is that they like to do, how do they find you?
Yes, please reach out. So you can either email us at info@hilizzy.com. That's info@hilizzy.com. Or you can pick up the phone and you can call us at 234-567-9449. That's 234-567-9449. Or you can find us on the web at hilizzy.com. That's hilizzy.com. And don't be fooled by my accent. I have lived in the United States for the last 20 years, but I've held on to the accent.
I love the accent, so it's great, and most definitely. And thanks, Sarah, for being on the show today. Lots and lots of good information always for our listeners.
And thank you.
You have a great rest of your day.
You too. Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Life Happens with Kim Hegwood. Be sure to tune in every Thursday at 10 a.m. wherever you listen to your podcast as we navigate through the challenges that emerge as life happens. The content of this podcast does not establish an attorney-client relationship or constitute attorney-client privilege, legal, medical, financial, or any other professional advice.